It's not live, so we can edit the video. We're not live. We're just, so we'll have to edit it. Yeah. All right, we are in Judges chapter. Did we finish up 12? You guys remember? Yeah, was it finishing up that, didn't we? Okay, I thought we did. All right, so we're in chapter 13 now. All right, so we just finished up talking about Jephthah, and then there was 3 other judges. Had to go back and look at my chart, but if you remember way back in the beginning of talking about the book of Judges, we had a chart that showed a timeline of when the judges served. Remember back when we started talking about Jephthah a couple weeks ago, stated that him and Samson would be around the same time. So you had the oppression of the Ammonites, and the Ammonites, of course, oppressed this side of the Jordan. Then they come across and oppress Judah and all of these nations, Ephraim. And so there's that oppression from the Ammonites. Of course, Jephthah was called. He was from up here. He comes over, comes down, fights against the Ammonites, and fight against the Ammonites. Fight against the Ammonites, and they come across, of course, and Jephthah defeats them. But at the same time, you have the oppression of the Philistines. The Philistines are over here. They lived along the coast, some of the best area. They had power over, of course, Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod. Those were all the principal cities of the Philippines. But they were oppressing. And so now we have an oppressor on both sides. At the same time, as you're reading this, it kind of indicates that, this is a oppression, and there was 40 years, and another oppression, and another oppression. But really, at the same time, Samson is now rising up as a judge to defeat the Philistines. But as we're going to see with Samson, he doesn't fully defeat them, right? What ends up happening to Samson at the end of his life? Yeah. Yeah, he's going to be pulled into giving away his power. He ends up in a temple, and of course, if you read ahead, he gains his strength back for a moment, and then he destroys the temple. He doesn't defeat the Philistines, and so the Philistines are still going to be an oppressor until really the time of David, and David's going to deal with them. And so we're getting, if you think about timeline here, we're getting closer to the end of the judges, of how many judges there are, and Samson is around that time. So he's going to start the oppression. All right, so chapter 13, we're looking at the birth of Samson. We're not talking about his life yet at all, but this is the point where we're told about Samson being born. And so let's read, verse 1. Let's go to verse 5. Someone want to read that?
The children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord delivered them into the hand of the Philistines 40 years. And there was a certain man of Zorah, of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and bare not. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto the woman, and said unto her, Behold, now thou art barren, and bearest not, but thou shalt conceive and bear a son. Now therefore beware, I pray thee, and drink not wine nor strong drink, and eat not any unclean thing. For lo, thou shalt conceive and bear a son, and no razor shall come on his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite unto God from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines.
All right, so verse 1, of course, it tells us that Israel was doing evil in the sight of God again. They had this cycle of apostasy where they'd be in a state of peace with God and peace with one another, and then they would end up sinning and going and chasing after the gods of the other nations and come back into that cycle. And so they were pulled again into forgetting about God. what brought them really to this point? I know we've talked about this, but it's good to remind ourselves what brought them to this point of apostasy again. What's brought them to that point every time, I guess? They stop following God. They, if you think about it, every time they start serving the gods of the nations that are around them, or the people that are around them. Okay, so we go back to, of course, first part of Judges. They chose to not drive out all these nations. And God said they'd be an oppression for them, or a snare to them, and test them. And so you have a group of people that are living in the same area as them. They're around, they may have dealings with, they see often. And then you have God's people, and they start to get comfortable with the sin of those wicked people. And once they get comfortable with their life and the things that they were doing, they start to do the same things, right? Is that any different for us today? Can that happen to us today? Yes. We're told in the book of 1 Corinthians that we can't get out of the world. We're not to be of the world, but we can't get out of the world. In 1 Corinthians 5, Paul was talking there about the man that was in sin, and they said they were supposed to not associate with that man because of his wickedness, and he was a Christian who knew better. But he said, you can't get out of the world because we live in the world. And so a lot of parables that Jesus gave about that, the tares and the wheat. But the thing is that we have to be careful to not get comfortable with the sin of those that are around us. What does that look like? What do I mean by get comfortable with the sin of those around us? Yeah, you agreeing with it. You think it's fine. You don't have a problem with it. And once we do that, we start making ourselves comfortable with it, what can happen to us in really a short period of time. Start doing the same thing. That's what happened with Israel here. They got comfortable with the sin of those that were around them. They started to join in. It's not that bad, right? Then they look at their lives and go, well, their life is fine. They have some similar things as me. They're doing the same things as me. Well, why can't I just do the same thing they're doing? And, of course, and ultimately, even if they don't deal with their consequences of their actions then, they will sometime. And so Israel had to deal with that. And so we've got to be careful. We've got to learn from that also here. And so the Lord delivered them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. That's a long time. That's a half a lifetime for most people, right? On the average. And so a long period of oppression with them. And so Samson here is going to be the 13th judge, and he's going to judge for 20 years. We're kind of giving a summary of what we're going to find out as we go through this chapter and others. And he will judge on the west side of Israel. He'll deal with the Philistines. And so verse 2, it says, now there was a certain man from Zorah of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and had no children. So we first learn about Manoah, and so he was of the Danites. And so the tribe of Dan should have been in the north. See that? All right, no, right here. Sorry, I was wrong. So the Danites, he was of the tribe of Danites, which is in the area of the Philistines. And so he's from that area. And his wife, her name, we're not given. We're not given her name. And it's kind of interesting as we go through this chapter, we're never given her name. But she obviously was a woman that was a follower of God, and she had a good character and good focus in her life because, she's praised in this chapter, really. And so, but we're told that she's barren, so she doesn't have any children. Zorah was a town in Judah on the western slopes of the mountains. You can find that in Joshua 15. You can see that name mentioned there. But notice verse 3. It says, and the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, indeed now you are barren and have borne no children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. This doesn't happen very often in the Bible, does it? Where an angel will come to a woman and say, you're going to have a child. That's happened with Christ, right? It happened with Abraham and Sarah. It happened with Samuel, right? With his mother. What was her name? Hannah. Yes, Hannah. Really, I don't know any other places that's happened. So it's very, well, Zacharias and Elizabeth, I was going to say them too. So, that's still, if you think about all the children that are born in the Bible, it's a very small amount. But in each one of those times, that, when God chose this child for a certain purpose, which each one of them was, right? Each one of those children that was born was chosen for a purpose. The parents were chosen because of who they are. You look at the character of each one of them, they had that character that God desired. Zacharias and Elizabeth, Mary, Hannah, all of them were extraordinary women of the Bible. And so we see that here of his wife. It's not given a name, but the wife of Manoah is the same way. And so it says the angel of the Lord. Now, we've talked about this before. In the New King James, angel of the Lord is capitalized. I don't think that's the case in any other versions. The King James that way. We're going to see that this more than likely is Christ. This is Christ. Of course, he's not called Christ. He's called the second of the Godhead. He's called the Lord in the Old Testament. But the angel of the Lord, a lot of times that phrase, angel of the Lord, is a reference to Christ and his workings in the Old Testament. Not every time, but many times it is. And they don't know this at this time, but of course, Manoah is going to figure that out later. And so this angel appeared to her and told her, you are barren, but you will conceive and bear a son. Now therefore, verse 4, please be careful not to drink wine or similar drink, and not to eat anything unclean. For behold, you shall conceive and bear a son, and no razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines. And so she's told at this point, so she still has not had the child. She's going to conceive and have this child in her. But the 9 months that she carries Samson, she is not to drink wine or any similar drink, or not eat anything unclean, because he's going to be a Nazarite. So I'm going to read Numbers chapter 6. And we talk about the Nazarite. Numbers 6, 1 through 8. I know it's a little bit kind of a lengthy reading, but verse 1 through 8. All right, so there's the requirements of the Nazirite vow. And there's only 3 times specifically that the Nazirite vow is mentioned in the Bible. Of course, with Samson here, you have Samuel, 1 Samuel 1 and verse 11, and John in Luke chapter 1 and verse 15. Now, you can also add, there's a good possibility that Paul was under this vow also. Yeah. It's not specifically mentioned, it just seems to be because he had not shaved his head or cut his hair for a period of time, and he did that right before he goes back to Jerusalem, and then he is cleansed and he goes into the temple. And he talks about a vow. It doesn't say the Nazirite vow, but it's very similar to what was talked about here. Now, the purpose of this Nazirite vow, I don't know all the details of it, but this was a dedicating themselves to God. And so they could not eat of any byproduct of grapes at all. So vinegar is mentioned. It's talked about wine, which is grape juice, but then there's also a strong drink that's, it said the liquor of wine. And so any of those things, any byproduct, anything that came from the grapes, they were not to touch. And then not only that, and we see in chapter 13 here, that she was to be careful not to touch anything unclean. So the Nazirite vow, was it for her or was it for Samson? Why? Why was it for her just for 9 months? Yeah. Think about this. You know, she was to be careful, and specifically told to her, he is going to be a Nazirite his whole life. Okay? And she was to be careful for the whole time that she was pregnant with him. What does that say about a child? You know, abortion, you know, one of the big things with abortion is they want to say that it's just a clump of cells. It's not a baby, it's not anything until it's born. I even heard the other day in this, talking about, you know, some of the interviews that Charlie Kirk had, but one that he had, the person said that a child was not a child until they could talk. And so they believed even 6 months after they were born, they could be killed still, which is terrible. But what this shows us is that even from the point of conception, that baby was a baby, and it was a living human being. And so she needed to be careful because his whole life, from conception until he died, was to be that Nazirite vow. And so she started that process because, of course, the baby is in her and sharing blood and things like that. And so, you know, this is a strong, in my opinion, a strong proof of life starts at conception. And so, because once the child was born, she didn't have to follow that Nazirite vow anymore because it wasn't for her, it was for him. And so I think that's pretty powerful in talking about life. And so, let's see, yeah, okay. And so the last part of verse 5 is also important because it says, and he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hands of the Philistines. We have not had a judge yet where it stated that that judge would begin to deliver. Every judge was to deliver Israel out of the hands of their oppressor. This is the first time it's stated that he's going to begin, which shows us that the Philistines will still oppress Israel for a period of time, which we know in the time of Saul and in the time of David that Philistines were still a problem. And David really is the one that subdued them. He's the one that put them under their control and took over the land of the Philistines for many years. And so that points to the fact that Samson's going to die before he's able to deliver Israel. But is he going to end up doing a lot to protect Israel in his lifetime? Yes, as we'll see. And most of the time it's by himself, right? By his own hands because of his strength. And so, of course, we know later on that his hair is where his strength lied. And so when he cut his hair, he lost his strength. Was it the strength of his hair or was it the hair that was keeping his strength, or what was it? His obedience to God, his vow, his Nazirite vow. When he broke that Nazirite vow with God, he lost his strength. And so it's not his hair, it was that vow that he had made, that really his mother had made for him, and then he continued his life following that vow. And so we can see that here. His hair was a part of that. All right, so he began to deliver Israel. All right, so that brings us to verse 6. And let's read verse 6 to, I don't know. It's kind of hard. It's all this disc. I'll just read it. Let's just do that. It's hard to just pick a spot in this chapter. Verse 6 says, So the woman came and told her husband, saying, A man of God came to me, and his countenance was like the countenance of the angel of God, very awesome. But I did not ask him where he was from, and he did not tell me his name. So verse 6, she calls him a man of God. What does that mean, a man of God? What does she think this man was? She didn't know he was an angel, okay? A prophet. Maybe just a prophet of God. A man of God is a reference to a prophet or a servant of God that goes and delivers a message. So she thinks this is just a man of God who has brought this message to her. But notice that her description, it says his countenance was like the countenance of an angel of God. So she had this idea that maybe he could be an angel because his countenance, what is a countenance? His appearance, right? His appearance seemed to be like an angel. Has she had seen an angel before now? I don't know. We're not told.
I think we, with the account of Abraham and Sarah, when they came, visited, and then when the angel came to help Lot leave, like, she would have known a description.
Yeah, she would have read and heard about the angels appearing to like Gideon and different things. And so, yeah, she could have said, okay, this could be an angel, but it's a man of God. And so she tells her husband, of course, she's by herself when this angel came to her, or when Christ, I'll just say that, I believe it is, came to her. But she says, very awesome. And that's a reference to, many people don't say the word awesome because awesome's always attributed to God. I say that word once in a while, and I don't attribute it to God, but God is awesome. And so many times that word is used in reference to God. And so, is that another fact pointing to the fact of who this is? I don't know. It could be.
Mine says very terrible.
Very terrible.
James version.
So terrible would be very awesome in the sense of it shakes you and makes you scared of his presence.
A little opposite of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Maybe I should just throw this one out. Maybe it's a bad one.
No, the King James is
I
fine.
think it's important to think about how words can sometimes change. They shouldn't, but they do in meaning. So awesome today is cool or neat, but back then was like, you're full of awe. This is very important.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. It wasn't like, that's cool.
Awesome hit more back then.
Yeah, and it's kind of like when Moses was, in front of the burning bush. He was terrified because of the awesomeness of God, His power, His presence, so the awness. Yeah, like Holly said, we use the word awesome differently today, for sure.
Well, mine says exceedingly awesome.
Yeah,
Which
that's
is quite the adverb.
yeah, because it's like compounding on each other. Yeah, it's amplifying it a lot. And so, she recognizes his countenance. It recognizes that he is not just a prophet. She thinks he's a prophet because she doesn't expect an angel to come to her. She probably thinks she's ordinary, right? She probably thinks that she's nobody special. So why would an angel come to her? But we're going to find out that she was chosen for a great purpose. And so, she knows, she recognizes how great this one is that came to her. And so that brings to verse 7. And so verse 7, it says, And he said to me, Behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. Now drink no wine, nor similar drink, nor eat anything unclean, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb to the day of his death. And so, verse 8, it says, Then Manoah prayed to the Lord and said, O my Lord, please let the man of God whom you sent come to us again and teach us what we shall do for the child who will be born. I think that's interesting. She comes to him and says, hey, this man of God, this could be an angel or looks like an angel, came to me and told me this. Instead of, it doesn't mean that he doesn't believe her. But it kind of does. But when I read this, to me, he doesn't question the fact that they're going to have a child. he's not questioning that. What he is saying is, come tell me what I need to do to raise him. Because he doesn't say, well, have this man come tell me if we're going to have a child or not, and prove that to me. He says, tell him to come to us again and teach us. He wants to know how he is to raise his child. He doesn't have a child at this point, right? You know, his wife is barren. And so he wants to know how God wants him to raise this child.
But see, the instructions that were given to her is what she needed to do. It wasn't the instructions of what he needed to do.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that. You know, it's her physical responsibility, not his. Yeah, so that's important. That's a good notice there. And so he's asking, you know, I'm going to be responsible for this child. I want to know how to raise him. How many people, when we learn that we're going to have a child, go, I want to go to God to give me that teaching of what I need to do? Because the Bible does, doesn't it? The Bible gives us a lot of instruction on how to raise a child. It's not, you know, we go to books all the time that man wrote, which gives us good advice and gives us good wisdom. But how often do we say, okay, I'm going to go to what God wants me to do? Because ultimately, if we follow what God tells us with our children, we're going to give them a lot better foundation in their life to make the choices that they need to in their future. And so, you know, that he can be commended. I think, again, we're seeing the character of Manoah and his wife. We're seeing that they're not like the ones that are off in sin and off doing this wickedness. They were chosen because they had a focus upon God. Manoah's first reaction was, God, teach me what I can do to raise this child in the way you want me to. And so, but also think about that. You see the character of Manoah and his wife, but then fast forward, did Samson stay with God all of his life? What did Samson end up doing? He ended up marrying a Philistine that was really a prostitute that lived in the other nation, the nation that he wasn't supposed to be associated with. We see him living there away from God. And so, you know, yeah, his parents, they had all those good intentions. They wanted to raise their child in the way that God wanted to, but Samson ultimately had his choice. And so I think that gives us an example of parents trying to do everything they can to lay that foundation, but it's still on the child. It's still on the one. You know, they have their own mind, their own choices, and our children are the same way. And so we see that they started him out well. They started him out in the way God wanted, but he made a different choice. And so that brings us to verse 9. It says, and God listened to the voice of Manoah, and the angel of God came to the woman again as she was sitting in the field. But Manoah, her husband, was not with her. Then the woman ran in haste and told her husband and said to him, look, the man who came to me the other day has just now appeared to me. So he asked for the angel to come to him, but where does he go? To his wife again. But this time she runs out and finds him. And she says, he's here, come back, and we'll talk to him. So verse 11, so Manoah arose and followed his wife. When he came to the man, he said to him, are you the man who spoke to this woman? And he said, I am. Manoah said, now let your words come to pass. What will be the boy's rule of life in his work? He asked that question, what will be his rule of life? The word rule there means his formal decree. When I hear that rule of life, he's asking what path? What path do I need to direct him to live and move forward? You know, what is going to be his purpose is really what it is. And then it says his work. Of course, what is he going to do? What path do I need to help him and instruct him to be on in his life? And so, you know, here, that path is going to be in service to God. What is that rule of life and work of our children that we raise them to do? To be servants of God. The same thing. To be ones that are focused on God. To be ones that are about his work. No different. And so we see that in Scripture, many places, how we are to raise our children. And so, he's asking that question. It's a very good question that he has here. So verse 13, it says, "So the angel of the Lord said to Manoah, of all that I said to the woman, let her be careful. She may not eat anything that comes from the vine, nor may she drink wine or similar drink, nor eat anything unclean. All that I commanded her, let her observe." And so the angel really repeats what he had told to her of her responsibility. And of course, that's pointing to the Nazirite vow, which is pointing to the fact that he is to dedicate his life to God. He is going to be in service to God. And so Manoah understands that. And so then verse 15 says, "Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, please let us detain you, and we will prepare a young goat for you." What does he mean by detain him? Is he going to go bind him in a rope or something? No. He's saying, please stay with us for a while. He says, I'm going to go get a goat and fix it up for you. We're going to kill this goat. We're going to eat it. We're going to commune together. He wanted this man to stay, maybe to ask him more questions, maybe to talk to him more, but he wanted to bless this man who gave him this good news, right? Of course, he doesn't have a child at all. Now he's going to have a son. He wants to bless this man who has given him this great news. And so look at verse 16. "And the angel of the Lord said to Manoah, though you detain me, I will not eat your food." Okay, for one, if he's an angel, does he need to eat food? No. He can. We see that with Abraham, with the men that came to him. But he says here, I'm not going to eat your food, even if you make it for me, even if you do detain me. But he says, but if you offer a burnt offering, you must offer it to the Lord. For Manoah did not know he was the angel of the Lord. And so Manoah at this time still didn't know. He thought he was just a man, thought he was just a prophet. And so the prophet, this angel tells him, you offer a burnt offering to the Lord. And so, verse 17, Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, what is your name, that when your words come to pass, we may honor you? And the angel of the Lord said to him, why do you ask my name, seeing it is wonderful? Now, if you go back to when the angel came to her the first time, when she was telling her husband, she said, I didn't know his name. I don't know where he was from. He didn't tell me. And so Manoah's like, okay, we want to honor you because you gave him this just great news to us. So please tell me your name so we can honor you. And the answer from this angel was, why do you ask my name, seeing it is wonderful? That's an interesting word. I think the King James, does it say secret? Yeah, secret. And that's interesting. Secret, the ASV, the New King James, uses the word wonderful. Somebody read Isaiah chapter 9 and verse 6. Okay, so the word wonderful is the same word. And Isaiah chapter 9 and verse 6 is talking about who? Christ. And so it's just really interesting there's this connection here. You have the word used here as wonderful or secret. So, so if you're reading the King James, it could be, it's secret in the sense of you're not going to know my name, I'm not going to tell you. But that same word is translated in New King James wonderful, but also used in Isaiah 9 as wonderful. And we're going to see Manoah is going to recognize that he was in the presence of God. And he's going to be scared for his life now. And we're going to see that here in a minute. But so here's a couple quotes that I just wanted to read. This one's from one of my commentaries. It's a lectureship book that has every book of the Bible. Anyways, it says the statement in verse 18 provides the best clue as to the identity of this angel. In Isaiah 9 and verse 6, the prophet declared in regard to Christ Jesus, the first word used to describe the second person of the Godhead is wonderful, the same word the angel of Jehovah used in identifying himself. And then Kaufman also states this. Also notice back in verse 11, when Manoah asked if the man was the same one who had earlier appeared to his wife, the answer was, I am, which is interesting. These very words were often used by Jesus Christ as himself as his identification as the I am, which is God. This strongly supports the belief that the angel of Jehovah was none other than the pre-incarnate Son of God. So this use of this word here is similar to the use for Christ, and so it's hard to not make those connections here, especially when we've seen this before.
So I was gonna say, in the BSB, for verse 18, it says, "Why do you ask my name?" said the angel of the Lord, "since it is beyond comprehension."
Yeah, that's interesting. It's a little different, beyond comprehension, which, when we think about awesome, we talk about awesome being a, extremely amazing. You could use that word wonderful as it's so great that it's beyond comprehension. So wonderful. I'd have to study that word wonderful out some more. It's used in Isaiah 9 verse 6 and in here, but that's interesting.
To see the perspective.
It is. It could be, I don't know. I like that though, beyond comprehension. Could be very similar to that use of word wonderful. But, because I don't know what transcript that version uses. I don't remember. I have to look. But it's got to be one of the Westcott and Horder or the Texas Receptus.
I really like the Berean Standard Bible, though. It really
Yeah.
gives a different perspective from a lot of the common translations.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like that. And a lot of times, the words that it's used there are pretty interesting and fitting.
So, given all those descriptions, would that then be the same person who appeared to Moses in the burning bush? Is it Jesus?
Yes. So I've always wanted to do a study. When I've read through the Bible, I wanted to just mark every time I feel like that it's Christ in reference to Christ. In the second in the Godhead. We call him Christ because we know him in the incarnate state. But in the before the second of the Godhead, but yeah, it's the burning bush would have been Christ. The rock that was struck by Moses was Christ. That's talked about in 1 Corinthians. Paul says that was Christ. Christ was the one that led them in the wilderness. And so Paul talks about that also in 1 Corinthians. And so there's a lot of references to the second of the Godhead in the Old Testament. I believe Gideon, it was second of the Godhead also. There's a lot of times that he has, a lot of people believe that or think that Christ had no workings before John, before he came to this earth, but he worked a lot in the Old Testament, really in creation too.
I cannot remember the exact scripture, it says, no time has any man seen the Father. So that makes me think anytime it seems like God's talking to someone in the Old Testament, it's probably Jesus.
Yeah.
Because he's wise, so.
Yep. Yeah, and so it's interesting. We're not specifically told here, but notice what is said in verse 19, the following. So Manoah took the young goat with the grain offering and offered it up upon the rock to the Lord. And he did a wondrous thing while Manoah and his wife looked on. And it happened as the flame went up toward heaven from the altar, the angel of the Lord ascended into the flame of the altar. When Manoah and his wife saw this, they fell on their faces to the ground. So he offers this offering on this rock. As it's burning and the scent is going up to God, the angel just goes right into the flame and goes up into heaven, and they see him go right up. Of course, what does that tell Manoah and his wife?
Who he was.
Yeah.
The word Lord in 19.
Okay.
Does that mean Godhead
Yes, I think that's
instead of Christ?
it's a reference to God. It's a reference to the Godhead. Yes.
Lord, that's not Jesus.
Well, Yahweh I think it's the word. I'd have to look if that's Yahweh or not. It may not be, because I think the New King James, it capitalizes the whole word if it's Yahweh. But yes, the Lord would be God, the Godhead, God the Father. I mean, all of them together. And so, yeah. So, because the offering is only going to go to God. It's not going to go to something else. Yeah, angel of the Lord, similar. All right, and why it's not translated, or why the wording in the Hebrew is not, if it was really the presence of Christ, the second in the Godhead, that it would specifically mention that. I don't know. Why it would say the angel of the Lord, I don't know. But many times that's the presence of Christ in the Old Testament, the second in the Godhead. He was depicted as the angel of the Lord. And not every time you see angel of the Lord either. You have to look at the context. But I believe that it happened here because of what happened. This angel then goes up into the flame to the Lord. He disappears out of their presence. And he's amazed by this. And notice verse 22 then. And he says, and Manoah said to his wife, we shall surely die because we've seen God. He fully believes that God was in his presence, and now he's going to die. And so verse 23, but his wife said to him, very logically, she says, if the Lord had desired to kill us, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and a grain offering from our hands, nor would he have shown us all these things, nor would he have told us such things as these at this time. So, he's thinking of Exodus 33, and we're not going to read these, we're almost out of time, I want to get to the chapter, but Exodus 33, I encourage you to read this. 33 and verse 20, Judges chapter 6 and verse 22, we're told that you cannot see the Father at all. Jesus states that in the New Testament. You cannot see the Father, but if you've seen him, you've seen the characteristics of God. And so in his mind, he's had God in his presence, and he thinks he's going to die. What he didn't know was that was the second. It wasn't the Father. God the Father could not be seen. But the second, the Godhead, was in his presence. And so in her mind, she says, well, wait a second. If God wanted us to die, he wouldn't have came to us and told us about this child. He wouldn't have accepted this offering that we offered. So no, it wasn't God the Father. And no, God doesn't want us to die.
And that would be broken his own word, because he already told them they're going to have a son, so how could he have killed them before they've had the son, which he told them that they
Exactly. So she was a little more calm in this situation. He was more like, oh, I'm going to die now. And she's putting some common sense into things. Oh boy. And so verse 24 says, so the woman bore a son and called his name Samson. And the child grew, and the Lord blessed him, and the Spirit of the Lord began to move upon him as Manaah Dan upon him at Mahana Dan between Zorah and Eshtal. And so this is where he lived, but this is the fact that his strength now is coming from God. And the Spirit of the Lord starts to move upon him, and this is where his strength comes. And so the word Samson, the name Samson, means little son. Just interesting. But God is fulfilling his promise. And so we get to the end of this chapter, we see that fulfillment here. So any questions on this chapter? It's a pretty interesting chapter. A lot of neat things in it. So, all right. Thank you guys for your time.